Hello, everybody. This is Ming Chen,
Hi, I'm Mike Zapsik from AMC's Comic Book Man.
and you're watching AFK, the AFK show, our favorite show on the planet.
One of.
One of. So you're watching the right show. Keep watching, and keep watching.
And keep watching. And keep watching. Don't stop.
I'm Ryan from 104.1 KRBE, and this is Alan Turney from Ain't It Cool News. Are you guys ready? Jason is backstage, so I think you need to make some Houston noise. Are you ready? Then let's give him a warm Houston welcome, Jason Isaacs.
Hi. Let's get rid of that for a start. Hi, I actually came in and then went backstage to come out again because that's the weird fantasy world that I live in. I belong out there. I've always been a geek. I read comics when I was a little kid. I love watching movies. I love watching television. It's weird for me that I'm up here and not down there. If I wasn't in the movies, I would be sitting there dressed as someone else. So, you know. You guys can sit down and relax. I don't need you at all.
Okay.
Sorry.
Actually, you know what I'll do for you?
Yeah.
I will take the mic out there, and if you
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I can
Thank
do
you.
that.
So this is my first ever convention. I have no idea what people... Thanks very much. I have no idea how to behave or what I'm meant to say. I probably will become, if I do more, I'll probably become slick and have a pitch. I know that some of the other people back there go, I love the Q&A stuff. I have like a 45-minute stand-up set. I don't have anything to talk about. But I'm guessing that there's a bit where you ask me questions and I answer. And so what I thought I'd do is I'd tell you, first of all, just avoid some of the more obvious questions and answers because I've been around for a long time and I've been asked some of them before, so I'll tell you anyway. And what qualifies me to be here, because this is a sci-fi and fantasy convention, I think, is I've been in some sci-fi and fantasy films. The sci-fi films I've been in, for those people who don't know, there are young people here, you can look them up on some streaming device and watch them. I was in Event Horizon with the lovely Sean Pertwee, who's here. Sean Pertwee, one of my oldest friends I've not seen for a long time, who's next to me in the booth. I was in a film called Soldier that the same director made. Yeah. That's very kind of you. You've clearly not seen the film. Yeah. I've been in some animation sci-fi things. I'm also in Star Wars Rebels, which I haven't seen. Well, it's quite popular. I know, I'm sorry about that. And Armageddon, I think you could say sci-fi-ish. I don't know. Bruce Willis saving the world seems like science fiction to me. And then fantasy films, I started off as in a film, don't pretend you've seen it if you haven't. Let's have an actual, genuine survey. Only if you've seen it, clap. I was in a film called Dragonheart. Dude, have I landed in the right place? There's almost nowhere else in the world where anybody would make some noise at that point. And then I was in Peter Pan, obviously, which was a great job. And as I obviously don't need to mention, I was in the film, the Harry Potter film, something, you know.
What was that again?
I was in 6, I think, of the Harry Potter films. I don't know, playing Lucius Malfoy. And then recently, if you want to go into fancy, I was in a series on USA called Dig about the end of days and how if certain religious extremists get their way, there'll be a world war and the Messiah will walk the earth again. I'm sorry, I know it's Texas, but that is a fantasy. Just so you know, that's not going to happen. Just so. So that's most of my fantasy and sci-fi stuff. There might be things I've forgotten. And questions like, was it fun being in the Harry Potter films? That's a different European cable version I did. But no, the Harry Potter films, yes, it was phenomenal. Obviously, it was ridiculously fun because all the other actors in it are people I used to queue up to see. I used to line up in the rain to watch them on stage, and suddenly I was working alongside them, so it was awesome. Do you prefer playing a good guy or a bad guy? I prefer good writing, because then I look good. When somebody writes something interesting, good and rich and complicated, and I just turn up and say the words, people go, "You're awesome, you were so rich and complicated." And it's actually some rather sad person sitting alone at home typing that should get the credit, but I get all the credit, so don't bother about good or evil. I don't ever play any part as evil, and I think that's one of the things I bring to the table. If I'm lucky enough to choose good scripts, people like Lucius Malfoy, for instance, which is obviously most of the reason I'm at this convention, I believe him. You don't need to look around too far in modern politics to find people who are racist and working on fear and trying to appeal to people's fear. And he's a guy that is terrified of the future and is stuck in the past and obsessed with his status and ego. And I believe him. And anytime you play a villain just to try and be creepy for the audience, it doesn't work. So I was in a film, is it fantasy? I was in a film called The Patriot, which a bunch of people, thank you. Which I'm trying to save the world from Mel Gibson. He's the world's greatest hero. Maybe that is a fantasy, I don't know. But he was actually a lovely guy. But I believe that guy too. My point is he was a very nasty guy, slaughtered women and children. If there's any children in the room, I apologize for that. I'm sure I'm going to swear in a minute because I get nervous in public, and I will swear because it is clever and grown up. But anyway, in that film, I tried to win the war, and I dehumanized the enemy, and so I could slaughter kids. And funnily enough, there was more of an objection to the fact that we killed animals. Right at the beginning, I killed all of his farm animals. Shooting children is absolutely fine, but don't touch the pigs. And don't kill horses. But anyway, that for me, when I play a part that other people might describe as a villain, I have to find something I think is realistic and truthful about it, and then I feel comfortable doing it. And so no part ever feels like a villain to me. In fact, I did a part, this is really not sci-fi fantasy, I did a series called Brotherhood that I suspect very few of you have seen on Showtime, which, that's not true, you haven't seen that. But anyway, it's fine. And it's based loosely on the Bulger brothers, and it was set in New England, and one of them was a criminal, big-time FBI wanted criminal, and the other one was a politician, but the criminal had maybe a bit more of a moral code than the politician. That was the kind of premise of the thing. A little bit of fantasy, since it's based on Whitey Bulger, and I don't think he's going to win Humanitarian of the Year awards. But still, I found something that I thought was truthful and believable. So that's what I look for in scripts, and that's what I think works. The reason people love fantasy and love sci-fi things is we see our own life played out, but with the dilemmas that we recognize and the morals that we recognize. So I hope that I don't get too indiscreet and say anything that will make me end up being sued or pilloried or unemployable, but I thought I'd throw it open to you to ask something other than, was it fun, and how did you get the job? People sometimes come up with interesting stories for how they get the job. They're always lying. It starts with a phone call from an agent who's sitting with a headset on in an office, wishing they had a more expensive suit. And then you read the script, you go and meet someone, you get the job. That's the most exciting version of that story. That's how it happens. Actually, with Harry Potter, it was slightly different, just for once, in that I went into audition for Gilderoy Lockhart, which is the part I really wanted. Yeah. I went in, and I'd done The Patriot, which was quite successful, and I went in to meet them for Gilderoy Lockhart, and I was in the room, and Chris Columbus said, "Would you mind taking a look at Lucius Malfoy as well?" And I said, well, I mean, because I fancied Gilderoy Lockhart. It was a great part. He was a good show-off, and very different from what I'd done. And I thought, oh, not another villain part. And I went outside the room, and I looked, and I thought, I don't want this. I'm going to go inside. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to. With respect. But anyway, I was embarrassed to do that. So I went in, and I did read Lucius Malfoy, and then I found they'd offered it to me, and I just felt very, very disappointed because I knew that Gilderoy Lockhart was a much better part. Boy, was I wrong. What an idiot. Thank God I didn't follow my instincts, and I ended up being Lucius Malfoy for a decade, which was tremendous fun. So,
fantastic. Has there ever been a part that you walked away from where you said, oh, I regret that?
Oh, my God. The career of parts I turned down is so much more impressive than the ones I did.
Share.
You can't ever tell, but there are numbers of the occasional film, but mostly there are some gigantic global smash television hits that I thought, that's not going to work. What are you, idiots? No one's going to watch that. And they've gone on to win every award under the sun. But, I don't know if it's true. I'm going to turn this into a therapy session now. I'm going to turn it to Tony Robbins here. But You know, for me as an actor, I can wake up in the morning, and if I'm not careful, I can wake up thinking, why aren't I that guy? Why aren't I in that movie, in that series? Or I can wake up and going, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I get to pretend to be cooler, tougher, sexier than I am, living these extraordinary adventures, and I'm really just some schlub who forgets to take the garbage out. So that, you know, it's all to do with what attitude you bring when you get out of bed. So I hope I don't turn into one of those guys sitting in a bar watching TV going, you know, that could have been me. I was offered that part. You know, and the bus goes by, that could have been me on that bus. I'm pretty lucky. I get to do some pretty great things. So, meanwhile, back at the farm, you are the people who are really important. So who's got any questions? Just the one person. When are you going to stop talking? I'm hungry. Is that a question? Or what?
Is there any role that you would love to play, you know, like James Bond or something like that?
Well, James
Bond.
Bond.
You are awfully sexy, so.
That's very, very kind of you. It's clearly bad lighting up here. Well, James Bond, Daniel Craig and I played lovers for a year on stage in Angels in America, so I'm biblically acquainted with James Bond. And I am here to tell you that he's one of the sexiest men on God's earth.
That is true, too.
He could almost turn me, and I'm quite heterosexual. So he's the perfect Bond and has made them about $12 billion a minute, so I'm sure they're not looking for a new one. But the truth is that I'm not much for the classics. I don't really like doing revivals of plays, and there's no point looking at things that already exist and going, I wish I was that, or what it would be like if I played that. It's always about the next thing, and I try not to live in the past. One of the odd things for me about being here is I'm signing photographs of things I did sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, whatever it is, and I'm going, I thought I was old then, and look at me, I got skin like a baby's bottom. But the truth is I don't look backwards, I look forward to the next thing. So I just finished Dig, which is great, and then in a couple of weeks I'm going to Australia to do a film, and then I'm going to Tanzania, which will be an experience, and I don't know what comes next. So, you know, somebody somewhere is writing the thing I'd like to do next. So I try not to covet other people's work or wives or money. I think that's the best way to get out of bed and have a healthy day.
Cool, I have a question over here.
Hey, Steph. Hi.
So if you said that, you know, you used to go to cons and everything, if you could cosplay as anybody, then who would you want to cosplay as?
Oh, well, I was thinking actually, because there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I haven't seen. All I've seen is people sitting there signing pictures, and I know there's a whole bunch of other really weird shit going on in this place that I would really love to go and see. So I might get a mask and walk around. Somebody said, why don't you get a mask of Lucius Malfoy and put it on? No one will think it's you underneath. It's clever, right? But I remember reading the Lord of the Rings scripts while I was doing the Patriot and being sent the Lord of the Rings and going, this is insane. No one's going to watch this. It's just, you can't even make out who. I kept on turning back to page 1 going, which one is an orc and an elf? And whether, you know, yeah, I know. It just seemed like the most terrible idea to me. Clearly, I've got the Midas touch when it comes to scripts. And I always fancied being Gandalf, because when I heard they were doing The Hobbit, I'm not very good as a mimic, but when I was at drama school, my voice teacher, dialect coach, used to come up to me and go, is this the face that launched 1,000 ships? And I thought she was making fun of the way I did what I thought was posh voices. But what she was actually trying to tell me is that you sound like Ian McKellen all the time. So I thought, when they were redoing the Hobbits, maybe I could play young Gandalf, because I'm possibly... One of the things that happens is I'm from up north, which I can cover up quite well with a kind of overlayering of accent. And that's quite passable, Ian McKellen. And it turned out that bastard wanted to play Gandalf in the other 3 films as well. So if one day he gets laryngitis or is not available and he's doing an X-Men film, I wouldn't mind dressing up as Gandalf.
All right, we have another one over here.
You know how you said that you thought it would be better to play
Gilderoy Lockhart.
Gilderoy Lockhart than Lucius Malfoy? Mm-hmm. Why'd you change your mind?
Well, it wasn't up to me. They changed their mind about me. That I went in there to do that. I think maybe they'd already met the man who played Gilderoy Lockhart, who was very, very good, Ken Branagh. And maybe he just wanted to not let me leave feeling bad about myself. I don't know why it happened. I think that I remember sitting next to Ken Branagh in the makeup chair one day when we'd already been shooting for a bit, and he said, "How's it going, love?" And I said, "I don't know. I feel like I'm over the top, quite frankly. I'm doing such a big performance. He went, look up, you'll see the soles of my shoes. And so it wasn't as it was mine. Although what I did do, and I apologize for anyone who's read this, I have said it in interviews, but it is true, is that when the day that I went in to do the first look-see for Lucius Malfoy, try on the costumes and all this stuff, they showed me the drawings, and he was in a pinstripe suit with hair like this. And I thought, you're kidding me? I'm a wizard. Surely, once in my life, I play a wizard. I can dress like a wizard or do something fun. So I said to the makeup lady, I said, can I have a wig? And she went, what for? And I said, well, can I have like long blonde hair? Like my son has blonde hair. She said, well, they've got you with salt and pepper hair. I said, no, but I'd like to try a wig. And she went, all right. And she got this like $5, gas station wig off the shelf. And then I went into the costumes and they had these pinstripe suits, like a businessman suit. And I said, I'd really like to try, if we have some time, some much more fur and ermine and kind of aristocratic robes. And she went, well, the director's already seen this. In fact, I think they might have done the design for the video game. And I went, well, I'd really like to try something of mine. So they took like a curtain down. I bought like a velvet curtain around me. And we went down to the set and they were actually shooting the Pixie scene, the Gilderoy Lockhart Pixie scene. And I go down and Chris Columbus was there. And the costume lady turned around and she went, Chris, to have Jason for a quick look, and he looked right past me. He went, "Where?" And they said, "She goes, this is Jason." He went, "What's going on? What's happening?" I said, "Oh, well, I thought he'd have a wig because I don't think he'd cut his hair like a Muggle. Or why would he want to dress like a Muggle? He hates Muggles." And I thought he'd dress in the robes that his family had dressed in for hundreds of years. He went, "Huh? Okay. Anything else?" And I said, "Well, can I have a? I was thinking I'd have a cane." He goes, do you have a bad leg? And I said, no, I thought that maybe I could take my wand out of my cane. And he went, well, no, the wands kind of just appear out of your sleeves, and they just like magically appear. I said, I know, but I thought mine could, maybe it could come out the cane, And he went, and Daniel said, I think that sounds really cool. And Chris went, you know what? I think the toy guys are going to love you. And they did. The toy guys have sold 12 billion canes. Not that I make any money from it. There we go. But it's nice to see them around the place. And that's how Lucius Malfoy ended up looking like he did. And then when I first got to set, very much.
Wow.
I first got to set, and I still had no idea how I was going to play him, what I was going to do. And there were all these amazing actors already in it. Alan Rickman, who is maybe the greatest villain that has ever lived and everything. Don't clap him, he's not fucking here. He's getting a round of applause somewhere else. Sorry about the language, sorry, cover her ears. I got there, and Alan Rickman, who is just a genius villain, had already been a genius villain in Die Hard and in Robin Hood, and then was genius in Harry Potter 1. I thought, how am I going to play this part? What am I going to do? And I put the wig on, and just kept on going in my mouth. The hair was going on my mouth all the time. So I tried to keep the hair straight, I had to tilt my head back. So suddenly I was looking down my nose at everyone. So that gave me a way to stand. And then I got there for the first rehearsal. And there was a guy at drama school who used to bully me, really bully me, a teacher. And he had this very haughty voice, spoke like that. He'd go, Isaac's rubbish, unwatchable. I don't know if you're doing any work, but it's unwatchable. And then there was an art critic in Britain who was not born into the upper classes, but had adopted this unbelievably ridiculous voice that was really, the most painful thing. And you hear the most tortured voice in the world. You listen to him on the radio, and you think, is he really talking seriously? And I thought, well, maybe if I do a combination of those two, I'll try and be very, very irritating. So we got to the first rehearsal, and I ran through the scene. The first scene I did was in Dumbledore's office with the late, great Richard Harris and with Daniel and stuff. That was for you, Richard. Actually, a bit of a crap round of applause for the late, great Richard Harris. We're going to do it. Sorry. It's Richard bloody Harris. Anyway, so I got there, and it was the first rehearsal, and I was nervous, because they're all great, and they're all done the film already, and we get there, and you're just running it through without the cameras, and I did this voice, this very extreme voice, I can't remember, where I can't even remember any of the lines, I remember the one at the end, and I could see the director going pale, and afterwards came up to me, he said, that was great, so I'm just wondering to myself, is there anybody anywhere who's ever really talked like that? And I said, Well, no, maybe not. But I mean, it's a combination of there's an art critic and this teacher goes, okay, good, all right, cool. We'll be a couple hours lighting the set, and I go back to my dressing room, and I knock on the door from the producer, David Heyman. He came to me and he goes, hello, Jay. And I knew him a bit socially. He goes, hey, Jace, how's it going? I was good. He goes, I was just talking to Chris, and he's a little bit worried about the voice. What is the voice? I said, it was a kind of cross between Brian Sewell, and he knew who that was, his art critic, and a teacher at school. He went, shit, really? I was like, is that going to work? And I said, well, I think so. And he goes, okay, oh, well, let's see. So I went out of the set, and when we went on the set, and then we run through we actually do it on camera, and I do the voice, and then I could see them looking at each other by the monitor. All this kind of, miming going on. And again, Chris came over and he said, I don't know about the voice. And Daniel again said, I think it's really cool. I think people will be doing that. I think people will be doing that voice in playgrounds everywhere. It's really annoying. And so he let me go with it, although every time we did a take, he'd come up afterwards. He's an incredibly nice man. And he'd go, that was wonderful, that was great. Can we let's do one more and maybe pull back on the voice like 80, 90%? And I go, so that's how we ended up like that. Anyway, do you have more questions? Any questions about Andrew?
I have one over here.
Okay. Hello. I was wondering, since you've been in so many different fandoms like Star Wars and Harry Potter, which one's your favorite?
Oh, I've got 2 kids. It's like asking me which is my favorite. The younger one. No, it's not true. Don't tell her. No. Some of the I don't know, I loved it all. Even the jobs I hated a lot. I've been in some real crap, which, there are not photographs out, believe me, and very few. There was one lady this morning who'd seen everything, even the very worst things that I can't bear to look at. But I've loved all of them because what I really like doing for a living is walking in someone else's shoes. I'm endlessly fascinated by who people are, what makes them how they are, and what makes them make the choices they make, whether they're in space or in wizards or whether they're, in prison or whatever it is. I was in a TV movie that has got a lot of acclaim, and I played someone who locked someone in a basement for 20 years. Like, what makes people do that, and what do they think? They don't think of themselves as bad guys. Nobody thinks themselves as bad guys. So I'm just endlessly fascinated with people, and if I'm lucky enough to get scripts that seem like they're people, even in amazing situations, then I enjoy. There's something to enjoy out of it. So I don't have any favorites, but there's parts that have completely taken me over. I've not been able to think about anything else. I dream about them. They inhabit you like a poison or something. And so I like that experience. I like extreme experiences. I like doing crazy stuff, jumping out of planes, and I like being transported. So there's parts that have transported me, and there's some parts that you're doing your lines and you're thinking about shopping. But I still love them all, and I'll love the next one. I'm about to, go and do a sequel to Red Dog, which was a very big hit in Australia that I don't think anybody outside Australia saw. You've seen it? You Australian? Oh my God. So anyway, it's an Australian book that was a big hit film there and there for kids, and I just read it and I thought, it's gorgeous. And there's numbers of projects I've done in my life that agents and representatives and all these people that find me work go, what are you, insane? Why would you do that? And I go, because I just fancy being that guy for that day or that month. So I enjoy all of them. That's the truth. Whether they're gigantic green screen, Harry Potter films that go on for 10 years, or they're tiny movies. There's an actor called Donald Loki who's in Gotham, who's a great, great actor. And only one clap from one person. No, it's fine. He doesn't deserve it. He's have his own panel. He won't be name-checking me, I'm sure. But anyway, he wrote and directed a film called Tennis Anyone that I was in. There's a tiny film almost nobody saw. And I'm a mad keen tennis player, and I loved making that. And so I keep seeking out new experiences. And I love the little ones as much as the big ones.
And you created this iconic look with Malfoy. Over here!
You see my bald spot? Sorry, go on, yeah?
So you've created the look, but you've also had the freedom to improvise, to ad-lib, and some of those were very famous scenes.
Well, that's what's amazing about the Harry Potter films. One of the reasons they're so successful, if anybody's interested in telling stories, whether it's on, making little films for YouTubes or putting plays on, creating an atmosphere of play and freedom is the only way to do it. If you constrict people, it just never works. And on that set, even though those books are iconic and people who come to the set know every single punctuation mark and everything about it, they still nonetheless created an atmosphere where you felt like anything was possible. It's a weird paradox at the same time. So that scene I was talking about, the very first scene I did, I won't take you through every day for 10 years because we'll be here for a while, but my very first day on the very first scene, I had this bit with Dumbledore, and Richard Harris is not only a great actor, but he's also the father of a man called Jared Harris that I was at drama school with. So I was a little bit nervous of Richard, so a mild ripple for Jared. He'll like that too. I'll tell him. But so I was a little bit nervous of Richard, so my opening gambit was, hey, Richard, I'm a friend of your son Jared. He's the best actor in our year at drama school. I thought that was a good opening. Thought that would work. And so he softened it, and Richard was telling me these very funny and very filthy and unrepeatable stories about his adventures as a swashbuckler in the 60s. And they were, jaw-dropping and brilliant. And then they said, oh, ready to shoot the scene. We walk over, and his was the first line as Dumbledore. It was some, admonishing remark to Malfoy. So we sit in the chairs, and they go, and, take one, action. And he looked at me. And it's his line, so I look back, and he keeps looking at me, and just looked at me. And I thought, shit, maybe it's my line. Maybe it's my line, I don't know. And then he kept looking at me, and I thought, it's definitely my fucking line, what's my line? Oh God, I can't believe my first take, and I can't remember the line. And he waited until I was suitably panicked and pale and shaking, and then he said his line, And so I thought, oh, okay, people are bringing their top game here. This is good. So then I had to, whatever he said, he slaps me down, and then Malfoy has to kind of flounce out of the room. So I flounced out of the room, and the director said, cut, okay, let's do another one. Jason, can you shut the door on your way out? And I said, yeah, or can I just wave my hand and the door shuts by magic? He goes, yeah, sure. And I went, that's good, isn't it? And I said, I don't like this. And then I said, sorry, I wasn't really focusing. Exactly where is Dobby? Where's Dobby going to be? And they went, well, wherever you look. Where do you want Dobby to be? And I went, like there next to me. And they went, oh, cool. Well, we'll see where you look, and we'll put him there. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good, isn't it? So then we do the thing, and we turn around. Sorry, a bit of physical action here. I would have stood on the table, but it could be dodgy. But I turn around from Dumbledore's desk, and I go like that, and I walk down the stairs, and I flick my cane. And Chris goes, we do the take, and I wave my hand, the door shuts by magic. Magic was a fishing wire, just so you know, fishing line. And Chris goes, okay, let's do another one. Jason, is the floor, you want to polish the floor? There's a slippy up there? I said, no. He goes, is your shoe? What was the thing with the foot? I said, I kicked Dobby down the stairs. And he went, and he looked at the special effects guys who are always there with their boards measuring tape and stuff, and they went, oh. I said, okay, cool. And he said, you did a thing with your cane? I said, yeah, when he tried to stand up, I hit him on the head. And they went, oh, okay. So we do it again, we do all the stuff, and then he goes, I think it's good, I think we got it. Anybody got anything? And I said, I kind of feel like I need an exit line, because he just tells me off, and I just, walk out the room. I just feel like he's just too proud a man to have an exit line. He goes, like what? I said, I don't know, something. He goes, oh, let's do one, try something. So we did action the whole thing, and Dumbledore says what his last line is to me, and I turned and I looked at Daniel, and I said, let us hope Mr. Potter will always be around to save the day. And Daniel stepped forward, puffed his little chest out, it was only 11, and he went, don't worry, I will be. And I walked out the room, and I thought, shit, he's good, isn't he? Blimey. And it stayed in the film, but then that's the atmosphere that he created throughout all of it for everybody. And so there are things you think must be in the book because they seem so organic to it, but actually that's what a great director does. He both directs, takes control of everything, but allows you to play. And that was in many ways my favorite scene, my favorite moment, because it's not like other acting, and it's not like another world, because most things I do, and anybody who stands up here and does, there's an undercurrent of fear. Like, is anybody ever going to watch this thing? Is anybody going to buy a ticket? Is anybody going to tune in on TV? And then the Potters, you just knew everybody loved them already, which is a great feeling.
I had a question about Peter Pan, which I think is the best adaptation of that story ever. And
stop it. Me too, yeah.
How did you attack that role? What inspiration did you use to play
Well,
Captain
the weird thing is about Peter Pan is that people think they know the story, and what they're actually talking about is a Disney cartoon, which has nothing to do with the story at all. I mean, it's completely unrelated to the story. It's like watching Hogan's Heroes and thinking you know what happened in the Second World War. It's just like that's a really obscure reference for anybody under 50 in the room. Sorry. But so Peter Pan, the original play and book by J.M. Barrie, is about a girl, Wendy, who hits puberty. It's a very mature work for children. It's about how in those days, if you're a little kid, and then suddenly you were a woman. There's a little girl who's told, you know what, you've reached that age, now we're going to marry you off. And it's scary as shit, you know, to be a kid. And I've got a little girl who's just reached puberty, and she will get to have all those adolescent years of, you know, this stuff and going to shopping malls and whatever else it is that teenagers do, lock themselves in the room and do. But back in that day, it was about you were suddenly an adult. And he wrote this terrifying book about that and about mortality. So that night, she dreams of a world in which people don't grow up. And she dreams of a little boy who still has his baby teeth. And she dreams of sexual predators who look like her dad because it's the only man she knows. It's a really interesting, complicated book. And no one had ever made that story before. You know, Disney made a very sweet little cartoon. So all I did was read the book and the brilliant script from P.J. Hogan, who's, I think, a genius in many ways. We did he was a genius like Kubrick. We did 121 takes once of a teddy bear landing on top of a cupboard. That's insane. No. But I thought he produced a fabulous work. The shame of it is, for him, because I think he's an amazing filmmaker, the film was not successful when it came out. It was very successful on DVD now and streamed, and it's a great film if you haven't seen it. It's a great film for people on the edge of adulthood, and particularly young girls. But it wasn't successful, partly because we came out opposite Lord of the Rings, I think, and which was slightly more popular for families. There you go. But no, I thought it was, you know, that for me that was a reminder, if I ever needed one. Follow good work, find interesting stories and talented filmmakers, and it doesn't matter whether the rest of the world thinks they're great or not. If you follow your guts and something really talks to you, then do that. And that's what I've continued to do. That's what I always try and do. You know. Any other questions?
Oh.
I see hands everywhere.
That's me. My question is over here.
It's weird. I thought you were here. Then I realized that's a speaker.
I could probably fit in the speaker.
Hi.
My question is you've played a soldier, and you're in Texas, which is the home of some of the biggest military bases.
Oh, no, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, everything in Texas is big except me. And I was just wondering if while you were here, you were planning on visiting any of the soldiers.
Well, I wish I had more time to do it. I played a lot of soldiers, actually. I played a British parachute regiment soldier, and my first experience I had with PTSD, and I met some amazing SAS guys and parachute regiment soldiers who've been in the Falklands, and it's been my great, I don't sound like a PSA, but it's been my great privilege to play soldiers a lot of times. I went and trained with the Rangers at Fort Benning for Black Hawk Down, and the older actors who were actually my age, who played Delta Force, got to go to Fort Bragg, and we were in barracks. We were getting up at 5 a.m, drenched with rain, we were marching everywhere, and I was in my mid-30s, and I had to train all these other actors who were in their 20s. They put me in charge, and my peers, meanwhile, were getting out of bed at 9 a.m, and the other Delta guys are going, let's go blow some shit up, yeah. And let's go to Kill House. I was like marching and carrying stretchers, but it's been my great privilege to work with them. And I did a film called Green Zone as well, in which all of the other actors in my unit, it's like, that's not even actually. Your hands didn't actually meet to clap there. I think maybe you're touching a leg. But anyway, it was. I met some amazing guys from the Marine Recon Unit and other Delta Force guys. So I spent a lot of time with American soldiers who were fantastically impressive individuals. And so I think I'm done. On that front, I don't need to spend any more time on barracks anyway. They're not that much fun. I've done that stuff. I love hanging out with soldiers. I think that one of the great untold stories, we've all seen American Sniper, or a lot of people saw that great film American Sniper, but there's a lot of people coming back who are not as manifestly damaged, having that much difficulty, but I think it is an almost impossible thing to ask of a human being to come from a theater of war and come back to shopping malls and an ordinary domestic life and expect there not to be a long, long period of adjustment, and that we all have to adjust to that as people come back amongst us.
Yes.
And it's tough. It's very tough for the families. I did some work with Blue Star Families, who I think are an amazing group, But I think we'll see more and more of those stories. I think that actually there's a very sophisticated storytelling out here. If we look at the stories about Vietnam, they're all they're pretty much telling the same story. And certainly my generation, my notion of what Vietnam was is based on the movies. And there's a responsibility on filmmakers to actually try and tell truthful stories about what happens, because pop culture becomes the received version of history. And And so my friend, I've got a friend called Paul Greengrass, who's a great filmmaker, made the Bourne films, and made United 93, and made Captain Phillips. And he made The Green Zone because he thinks it's important that in pop culture, through popcorn entertainment, we tell stories about the real world that we live in, and that for the next generation, that will actually become their notion of history. Sorry, the question was, am I visiting anywhere else? No. This is my entire experience of Texas. My hotel room, and this gigantic building. And when people ask me how Texas was, I'm going to say it's very well lit and square. Haven't even had any barbecue. Desperate for an animal that's been killed on my behalf. Sorry.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Over here. I was just wondering...
You're not in there? No, okay. Go on.
I was just wondering what your Patronus would be.
What, my?
Patronus?
Oh. Skunk, probably. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a believer in anybody else saving anybody. I think it's all down to you. I thought that, no, I'm going to criticize Joe Rowling, one of the greatest storytellers ever. But anyway, I'm not a big believer in anybody coming to save you. I think it's all down to us and how we treat each other. Wow, it suddenly got spiritual. I'm going to pass the collection plate around in a minute.
We have time for another one here.
Stage left. Hey, so does that mean you'd be
Wow,
your
it's
own
so long
Patronus?
since I've been on stage. I can't remember what stage left is. Stage left is that way. Yeah, there you go.
I've noticed that you're excellent at dishing dirt on Richard Harris, so thank you for that. And that you're remarkably good at impressions. I had no idea.
Of Ian McKellen. That's it. That's all you get.
I'd like to hear another one, but my actual question that I came up for was, tell us more about Jackson Brody and playing an adult romantic lead male, and let's talk about some non-sci-fi adult roles, and how do you make Kate Atkinson write faster?
Well, so that will be a question that applies to at least 4 people in this room. I'm sure you're all thrilled that you came. I've played a number of detectives. He was a private detective who worked in Scotland based on these brilliant books, Jackson Brody books by a woman called Kate Atkinson, who was slumming it when she wrote detective fiction, because she's actually a proper novelist, and that's why the adaptations were so great. And a slightly broader question that might apply is what is it like for me, who's played some villains, to play the hero and get the girl and catch the bad guy? And it's awesome. What do you think? You know, the only thing is, I have a wife and kids, and you might think it's fun. It's not that much fun getting naked with strange people in front of a film crew. Everyone's incredibly respectful of women who take their clothes off, as they rightly should be, and they just ridicule men who take their clothes off all the time, and dropping to the floor doing push-ups all the time. So I played a detective on a series. I always thought it was fancy, a thing called Awake on NBC, which was, thank you very much, thank you very much. Oh no, there's nothing worse than a mild ripple of applause. Shoot me.
Do it right.
Thanks. And that's why it was cancelled. But anyway, it's nice to solve the crime and get the guy, but actually get the bad guy. But the truth is, you really want to play people who are troubled. Nobody buys a ticket to a movie or switches on the TV to watch The Village of the Happy People. You want to see people who are having a really crappy time solving problems and challenged by them. And so the best detectives, like the guy in Dig, the series that just finished, the FBI thing, he's really a messed up dude. And, he can't get over his dead child. He's having sex with people and phoning his ex-wife every time from the bathrooms. I mean, if you're going to task anybody with saving the world, choose everybody but him. And that's why it's a good story, I think. So I love Jackson Brody because he was a kind of messed up guy. He had this one chance of love with some fabulous woman who adored him, and he completely screwed it up because he's an idiot. And those are the kinds of characters I like to play. I'm not very good at being squeaky clean.
I think a lot of us would like to know, all right, 2-part question here.
Okay.
Yes,
and 4.9.
Most difficult role acting-wise, and then the most physically demanding role.
Well, Dig was, I'd just been running for 9 months and jumping through waterfalls and smashing, falling off. I did all the stunts in Dig, absolutely everything, except the very first day, someone had to jump naked into a pond, and it was not very deep. It had to look like it was deep, and it was full of rocks, and they made a Russian stunt guy jump in who had far, far whiter and more hairless buttocks than me. And the internet was, awash with stuff about Jason Isaacs' ass, and it wasn't mine, but everything else is me. That's the most physically demanding thing I've done. But the most difficult role, is that what you asked? Although I played a guy, now you really will have to search the internet if you want to find this. It's called Scars, and it was a one-off piece for British television. It very nearly got a channel cancelled and got us all arrested. There was a documentary maker who had met a very, very violent man, a man who'd spent his life steeped in violence and terrible violent crime, and he'd asked him, he said, look, can I film you? No, can I record you talking about violence, and then I can I want to tell a story about a violent person. I'll just use it as the basis for a script. And so he started to record this guy, and the guy wouldn't stop talking. Like me now, probably. They're trying to get me off the stage. But anyway, and he talked for over the course of a year, he talked for like 50 or 60 hours, and he had a nervous breakdown as a consequence of these interviews, because he began to realize the damage he'd done to people. The people he'd carved up, people had burnt, people had run over and killed and stuff. So he had a total nervous breakdown. Then he started to threaten the documentary maker. Then he came back to him and went, this has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. And he was a slightly deranged person. Anyway, the documentary maker went to the film company and said, here's the script I've written based on that. And they went, yeah, your script sucks, but the interviews sound really interesting. And so he asked the guy, he said, can I get someone to act out your words? If I change the names and places where you tell me who the people you killed and stabbed and burnt, can I get someone to act out your words, because they're your words about growing up in a house? And he said, yeah. So I got this transcript, which was just completely horrifying. And it was just me. It's a monologue. Everywhere that he did the original audio interviews, we did a filmed interview. So if he was in the van, he smoked a lot of drugs, or if he was in his workplace, or if he was at home whispering with his wife in the other room. And we acted them all out. Some of them, not 50 hours, just 1 hour of it. And, but I was steeped in this, just a lifetime of violence and terror and damage and self-hatred. And it was all I could think about. It was just me on camera. It was just me reading the scripts every day and just me bringing this thing to life. And it was a dark, dark place to go to. And it was about a month. I had to get away from my wife and kids. I couldn't stay at home anymore. It was really, and it terrified me, because this is a guy who, if you beeped him, you cut him up, you pulled in front of him in traffic, or he did and you beeped his horn, he would probably get out of the car with a wrench and open your head up. And he has killed so many people. And when the documentary maker in the audio interview says, how do you get away with it? And he says, you don't understand, Leo. People like me get away with anything. Middle-class people think that you're protected by the law or restraining orders. I've carved people up in daylight with carpet knives. I've smashed a traffic warden's, a parking meter guy, head open with a motorcycle helmet till it was like a watermelon. He goes, no one ever testifies against people like me. People just won't go to court. So I was in this very dark place, thinking everybody around me was carrying weapons, was going to kill me, or was going to kill anyone. I honestly have not beeped my horn once since in my car, because you never know who's around you. And it was a horrible experience. I felt like I was poisoned. I felt like moral cancer for 3 weeks. And I will tell you now, that was the most enjoyable working experience I've had in my life, because I love to be someone else, and that I was completely someone else. And that is the sick thing I do for a living. And I apologize, but if you find it, I don't know how you'll find it, but people complained to the channel because they thought it was the real guy, and they're like, why would you give airtime to a guy like this? And at the end, in the thing, he said, you should know that there are millions of people out there like me, so be careful how you deal with other people. And I made me want to move to a biodome in New Zealand and get my kids away from the world. But luckily, the world is not full of people like that. It's full of people like you and me, so it's good. Yeah.
I know you haven't seen the episodes yet, but I do want to let you know that Star Wars Rebels is the best Star Wars of anything in a long time.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So when those scripts came across your desk, how did you react to that role?
I didn't think much about it. I went down to a place in the valley. I thought, do I want to do this? Oh, it's like an hour's drive away. And I honestly had not begun to process what an enormous thing the Star Wars universe is, and how many people are in love with it and what it means. I'd watched the movies and loved them. I didn't like the second 3 movies anywhere near as much, mostly because I knew the actors. So, what I love when I watch movies or television is believing the story completely. If I've met the person, or I've seen them with their pants down or vomiting in the street or whatever, I was at their wedding, I'm unlikely to believe them as a Sith, So I didn't buy the second 3. I bought the first 3, enormously. And so I had left the Star Wars universe. I was a mad fan when I was a kid. But so I got these things, and I thought, what is this, a cartoon? I don't, And I went down there, and the actors, Freddie Prinze Jr. was there, and all the other actors were there. But I hadn't seen any of the artwork. I didn't know who was going to watch it, didn't know where it was going to be on. And I recorded a couple of times. In fact, I remember they had a putting machine in the thing, and I was putting all the time. They went, Jason, we can hear you putting. It's not on the recording. Oh, sorry. And all I wanted to do was find a voice that was not. Sometimes people hire me to do what I've done before. They go, oh, that's the guy who was Lucius Malfoy, or he was in the Patriot, or he's Captain Hook or something. And I thought, well, I don't want to do the same thing. So I tried. I remember thinking, now what the bloody hell am I going to do? I'm running out of villains' voices. And so I thought, what about James Mason? He always scared me. James Mason had that kind of strange, a voice that kind of blurred one word into the next. And so I thought I would try and give the Inquisitor a flavor of James Mason without anyone noticing, because they go, oh, he's doing something weird. What's that? So I recorded it, and there was only a few sessions. And then all of a sudden, the internet started to light up with that thought, I should have taken that thing seriously. People are really watching this stuff. And now it turns out it's this global phenomenon, and apparently I didn't do too crappy a job, which is good, because I wasn't concentrating that hard, I'll be honest with you. And then on the last day, they showed me the artwork and the lightsaber, and I went, that guy's awesome. And he's got the coolest lightsaber. I mean, I've got the coolest wand in the Potter films. I've got the coolest lightsaber in the Star Wars sequence. So I'm now thrilled that I did it, but I'll confess at the time I didn't think too much about it. I didn't realize how much it would be out there in the world. Which is probably the best way to act, if anyone's ever thinking of acting, is to do it like my kids do in the back garden. If you ever think, oh my God, it's a $300 million movie, and thousands of executives are going to see this, and then you just think like that, and your lips sticking to your teeth. So the best way to be ever is same way. I still have to audition at my age and all the things I've done, is to walk in the room and then just not care, but not ever be intimidated by any situation. I certainly wasn't intimidated by recording that.
Something interesting. I've talked to a lot of actors who will not watch their work.
I'll be the judge if it's interesting or not. You just put it out there.
I deserve that. All right, so have you ever just said, I'm done filming it, I'm not going to watch it? Or do you watch everything that you do?
Well, I try. I don't know if I pull it up, but I try and look, walk, sound, breathe like somebody different every time. I never play this. I mean, you've never seen me playing anyone like this on screen before, because who would put this in a film, right? But I kind of watch to check that I'm getting it right. The really obvious version, if you've got a limp or a stutter or an accent, I use American accents a lot. I want to listen to check that my accent isn't slipping, or whether it's consistently, Dig he was only from Chicago a bit, but I didn't have a dialect coach in Croatia, and I was thinking, does he still like Chicago? So I watch things to check. When they're closer to me, I feel very uncomfortable watching it. I can't watch, obviously, love scenes or sex scenes. I find it ludicrous. I can't believe.
How does the spouse handle those?
She finds it hilarious. That somebody else would have to put up with me for
She's like,
5
you're
minutes.
trying that move on her, huh?
Whatever. It's hysterical. So I watch things. It's easier to watch things like the Potters or Peter Pan or whatever it is. When they're extreme characters, it's great. When they're more like me, it's uncomfortable. But mostly, I just want to seem like I'm in the moment. I just want, if it looks to me like I'm thinking about my shopping or trying to hit a mark or trying to say a line that's written, I'm horrified. And I just watch to see like I'm. The secret to acting, don't tell anyone else's secret, but the secret to acting is engaging with the other person. If I look like I am listening to the other person and being affected by them, then I'm all right. So, but if I ever look like I'm thinking about myself, like, here's the bit where I show that I'm angry, here's the bit where I show that I'm tough, here's the bit where I show I'm cool or sexy, then I just ask for another take. Because in real life, even now, what I'm trying to do is communicate to you, and I'm not doing, here's the bit that I seem smart when I'm talking. And that's it.
Any final questions? Does anybody have one? All right, I can hop down here. Okay, tiny human on the floor.
Do you always use people from your past to develop your characters?
Never. Sorry, I've never. I don't know what. No.
Like you use the voices.
That's right. In Malfoy. Well, I always try and find a voice. That's the truth. Some people start with the shoes or the walk or whatever it is. For me, it's the voice because I'm from Britain, so you may have noticed that. I don't know, but I come from Liverpool. So when I grew up talking like that, which is Liverpool accent, not very strong for Liverpool, but quite mild. And then I moved to London, and everybody took the piss out of me. Everyone made fun of me at school. So I went to school one day talking like that. And I came home talking like that. All right, Mum, I'll be back at 5 o'clock, which is a London accent. Then I went to university, and they all sounded like Hugh Grant. And I thought, oh, shit, So I just totally adapted my voice, and I was, I have a glass of Coke and a piece of cake, stuff like that. And I've always had that real social weakness. I'm genuine, I'm telling the truth. Kind of psychological weakness that I'm talking to someone, and I start mirroring their voice back. And now I've got kids. Sometimes they lean over and they go, Dad, you're not Australian. What are you doing? You know, something like that. So for me, in Britain, since you can pinpoint people when they speak, not just where they live geographically, but where they live socioeconomically and their level of education and how they'd like to be perceived. You know, you've got those trustafarians, who call them in England, like people who come from a lot of money but want to sound like they come from the street. You know, so you can hear everything about people in Britain. So if you're a British actor, you need to get the voice right always. And it's what happens sometimes when Americans come over and play British characters. They kind of get the accent right, but they miss the other 12 layers that we hear when people speak. So for me, it always starts with the voice. And if it's people from the past or people I've met, Black Hawk Down, it was my drill instructor. Green Zone, it was one of the other soldiers. It's always, if I can get a voice, I feel like it's a way in for me.
I think you need to be an American superhero because
thanks very much.
Most of them are from the UK.
I know.
Right, that's the truth.
Thank you on behalf of my brethren for opening your doors to us.
One more here.
When I watched Peter Pan, I have it on DVD. In the special features, you did a thing where like you walked around with a camera or something.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop laughing during that. How much fun did you have doing that?
Well, that is an 8-minute thing called Captain Hook's Diary. I gave them 12 hours of obscene, defamatory, slanderous material from which there would be both lawsuits and suicides. So I had a lot of fun, but I filmed some spectacularly bad behavior. There were some really outrageous things going on. It was a 14-month shoot. All of the kids had chaperones there. Some of the chaperones were sent home. I'm not saying why. But they were lucky to be sent home and not off in a van somewhere with a straitjacket. And there was some extreme behavior. I've been around some Hollywood stuff where you go, in no other working context would this behavior be allowed. And I used to shoot all the time. I'm a geek. I'm an early adopter. I'm a comic book geek. I'm a gadget geek. I was on the internet before there was the web. I was on bulletin boards and stuff like that, dial-up. That's right. We celebrate the geek here. It's so great. Because I was a loser with no friends. Yay! So, and still am. But so I've forgotten the question now. It became too revelatory. But so I had an early, it's called a Sony PC7, the first mini DV consumer camera that you could shoot. And nobody had ever seen cameras before, so no one even knew there were cameras. So I was shooting on movies where people weren't even, they would never think they were being filmed because the technology didn't exist to film people. And I remember shooting on Armageddon, for instance. I got some footage on that when everybody involved is dead, or I win the lottery, I will release, which will make your jaws fall off. And I have some similar stuff from Peter Pan. So that is when I sent, they knew I'd been filming all the time. So the editors of the making of said to me, listen, send me your tapes. I'll cut something together. We'll put it on the DVD. So I sent them 12 hours of stuff. They sent a note back. They went, this is explosive shit. Do not let this get out there, but hold on to it. Because one day, someone will want to see this. So that is the very sweet Disney version you have on the 8 minutes there. I know you can no longer do it because everybody knows now that you're filming, and so they behave accordingly. But I used to get right up under things with that. It had a articulatable screen, so you could see that you were shooting, and I would just shoot some stuff that I can't tell you about.
I got one more question over here. Final question.
Jason, I am the one guy who really did enjoy Awake.
Oh,
and
thanks very much.
I did watch it. Did they share, since they didn't get a second season, did they share with you what they thought would happen and what their end game was?
So for those who didn't see it, Awake was a television show in which I was a detective and had a terrible car crash, and I woke up from this crash in hospital, and my son had died, but my wife was alive. And then when the day finished and I closed my eyes, I instantly opened my eyes. I was in a world where my son had survived and my wife had died. And I didn't know which one was real. I went from one to the other, and I solved cases in both worlds. And the big question for people all the time was, which world is real? And the answer is, yes, I know the answer.
Are you taking that to the grave with those DVDs?
But, no, I can't tell you. Can't tell you, they'll find me and kill me. And I think we might, I wish I had a better exit line. I think that might be done. What is it, 5 o'clock now? How long have we been talking?
You're close to an hour right now.
Yeah. I mean, I will take more questions. I'm fine. Let's just go back and stand there and sign. Stand there and sign.
All right, we can
do some
more.
I'm fine, unless somebody, Jeremy Renner's waiting to get in.
I know that you said that you're a big comic book geek. What was your favorite comic book series?
Well, here's the thing. I associate comic books with pain. And I'll tell you why. When I was a kid growing up in Liverpool, Sundays we used to go and get fish and chips, which is an English institution. It's a bag of oil with a little bit of potato and fish in it. And, we would go to get fish and chips, and while it was cooking, next door was a newsagent, a store that sold secondhand comic books. They had boxes of secondhand comic books. And I used to buy all Spider-Man stuff, but I also used to buy, I loved Daredevil. I was a huge Daredevil fan. And Green Lantern fan, and I mean, we're talking about back in these were the not first editions. It was the late '60s, but the early to the first editions, and everything, all the DC and Marvel comics. I used to grab whatever I could get because they were secondhand, and I never got them in sequence because it was whatever was in the secondhand box. So I'd be like episode 1 of this, and then number 24, and then next week be number 12, and I'm like trying to put this shit together, work out. And the stories was confusing enough, but I loved. I think if I had to pick one, it was Daredevil, because Daredevil was an ordinary guy who taught himself these skills.
That was always my favorite.
Yeah. Superman, I thought, Superman can do anything. What's the point in that? There's no limitation, no parameters on it, apart from green kryptonite. Like, whoever comes across green kryptonite, And Spider-Man had an edge because he was bitten, but Daredevil taught himself, and like that guy who really exists in America, the guy who clicks with sonar, the blind guy, and has schools teaching other people, who's an amazing man. He taught himself those skills, and of course I would walk around with 2 walking sticks and try and do that stuff and just break things. So I loved it. But what I remember, I'm being absolutely honest now. I remember we'd bring them back, and we would sit, and my family spent our whole life watching TV. It's funny because when you have an English accent, people think you're educated and you're well-read and stuff. No, I watched TV my whole life with my family. We were in one room, always the smallest room in the house. They'd save the nicest room for best. I don't know what best was, when the Queen was going to come and visit or something. Like, nobody ever went in there, had plastic on the furniture. We'd cram ourselves in a small room. We'd all sit around and argue about what we were going to watch, but pre-remote control probably. But Sunday afternoon, Hogan's Heroes was on. And that was kind of family viewing. And that's why I mentioned it before. They'd be sitting watching it, and I would be reading comic books, eating fish and chips, which have a lot of salt and vinegar on them. But I'd always cut my fingers on the comic books. I'd cut my fingers on the edge. They were well printed. They were good paper. And I'd get paper cuts, and I'd get salt in them. So for me, I had this unbelievably physical memory of reading comic books that they cut you, and they sting you. And it felt to me like, that I felt the pain. I felt Spider-Man's pain. I felt Bruce Wayne's loneliness. I felt Daredevil's blindness, because they was actually like stinging me. And that's a physical memory I have of comics. Weird. Hello, Draco.
Hello.
Draco.
My question actually had to do with, I guess, have you always known you wanted to be an actor? Was there like a revelation moment, or was there something else you wanted to do before you got into acting?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for that, because I know it sounds like a joke, but I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I went to study law at university, and I was very much like, I suspect many people here, I guess, the cliche is true of people who are into comics and stuff, that I just felt like I didn't really belong anywhere. And I was in a crowd. I could always fake like I belonged. I was always able to kind of put forward some kind of confident air and braggadocio, but these were all very upper-class people who came from a lot of money, and it wasn't my world. And, I come from a world where we all watch TV, and they all had been hunting, or I don't know what. But I just didn't belong anywhere, and I faked that accent, and I drank a lot, because they were all drinking a lot, and I wandered around the student union building, the freshman building, where they were taking money off gullible freshmen to join clubs that would then disappear forever. But there was a sign saying, "Can you do a northern accent?" And I thought, well, I can do that because I'm from Liverpool. I've hidden it for years, but I can. And I went in and I auditioned for a play, and I got a part in this play. And suddenly there was somewhere to go every day where I didn't have to pretend to be someone else, which is a weird thing to say, because, of course, that's exactly what you do in a rehearsal room. But I was somewhere where I didn't have to pretend to be posh, and and it didn't matter what background you brought to the room. And there was an intimacy. I mean, I've never, I've been married, thankfully, for decades and decades, because I've never known how to chat to the opposite sex. I've never known what a move is. I don't even know how to make new friends, but I have lots of friends, because acting is a world where you're instantly intimate with people. It takes a village. It could have been the sailing club, or whatever it was, macrame, I don't know, anything, tennis, but because it's acting, we're in there in a room discussing why people behave, how they do, and I loved it. And we did plays, and we took to the Edinburgh Festival, and then when it was time to leave college, some of my contemporaries were applying for drama school, which I thought was just insane, surreal, arrogance, because I played a little bit of soccer, but I wasn't going to write to Liverpool and Manchester United, see if they, I'm like, what, are they nuts? But it was £10 to audition for drama school, and I'm quite competitive, and it was a day out in London, so I auditioned for drama school, and when I got in, I thought, well, if I did that for another 3 years, I won't have to grow up and join the real world and get a job. And so I did that, and then I thought, let me see if I could ever get one job in the theater somewhere, because then I'll grow up and do something. I don't know what, the thing that people do in suits, you know. And I got a job in the theater, and I thought, I would like to be on television just once, you know, just once. And I got a small part in television. I thought, I wonder if I'd ever get a big part in something. Would I ever get a big part in something? And here I am, 30 years later. I don't know what happened. So, no, I wasn't. But I think your generation, nobody knows even what jobs are going to exist in the future now. So just follow your heart and follow your passion, and you become obsessed with things. I had a friend recently whose kid was at a very progressive school in Los Angeles. I said, how's he doing at the school? He went, he just spent 3 weeks at Snapchat. They wrote to me and they said he's the smartest kid they've ever seen, and they've offered him a job if he wants to leave school early. I said, that sounds good. He went, yeah, I'm going to school this afternoon. They're going to expel him. He's failing everything. So, you know, who knows? I still don't know what I'm going to do, but I get to pretend to be other people, and other people's jobs seem really interesting to me, like cops and astronauts and wizards. That seems cool.
You know, we just wanted to, I think, collectively thank you, because
Yes.
you created these characters and you help us escape. And thank you for what you bring to these roles, because I think we all have more of an education that it isn't just the writer or it isn't just the director, but it's a collective experience and how much you bring to the table. So I would like to thank you. And on behalf of Houston, a big round of applause for Jason.
Wait, hold on. I want something from you. So I've left my wife and kids to come here, and you know, to come for the weekend, and they've gone on holiday. It's what they call half term in England. They're off school for a week. They've gone on holiday, and I came here. So I wanted you to say thank you to my wife and kids. Wait 1 second. Hold on. Just so on the count of 3, you're going to say thank you and then wave at them. Oh, you all look terrible. Wait a second. It's really it's bad lighting. Oh, there you go. You ready? 1, 2, 3. And thank you very, very much. Bye.
I think you've proven that the geeks really shall inherit the earth.